Big diplomatic victory for the Indian government over 2 months of a very tense face-off has ended in a big victory for Prime Minister Modi and the Indian government's diplomatic efforts. The Doklam Standoff is all set to end. In a statement put out by the Ministry of External Affairs, the centre said that India and China have agreed to begin disengagement of troops at Doklam. The MEA said, and I quote, "In recent weeks, India and China have maintained diplomatic communication in respect of the incident at Doklam. During these communications, we were able to express our views and convey our concerns and interests. On the basis of this expeditious disengagement of border personnel at the face-off site at Doklam has been agreed to and is ongoing." Remember, India and China were locked in a tense standoff at the Tri-Junction area between India, Bhutan and China at Doklam after the Chinese army began constructing a road in this area, prompting Indian troops to move in. China has maintained a shrill rhetoric through these 2 months, refusing to withdraw troops in the name of protecting its sovereignty. But clearly, before the BRICS summit in China, better sense prevailing. I want to go across to our crack team of reporters tracking the story. Joining us now, Sudhir Ranjan Sen, Gaurav Sawant. Gaurav, a story just being put out by Reuters where the Chinese Foreign Ministry is making it seem as if India pulled out first. So there will be this posturing in front of domestic constituencies where India will say India won and China will say, well, they backed off first.
Spot on there, Rahul. So now the two foreign ministries will play to domestic constituencies, but on ground, the situation is one expeditious and mutual withdrawal, and more important, because this may be semantics, Rahul, the bigger, more meatier aspect is there will be no road construction in that area. Chinese troops there, not as much as a threat to India as the Chinese road would have been in a disputed area between China and Bhutan. And this is where sources are telling India today that the commitment is there will be no road construction in that area. And that's a commitment that India can actually verify at every stage.
I'm not certain about that, Sudhi. And the reason I say this is because right now there is this dimension of the Indian Prime Minister travelling to China for the BRICS summit. This was leverage India had over Beijing. We could have said we're not coming. The BRICS summit would have collapsed. There would have been a huge international embarrassment for Beijing. And the ante would have been up, but there would have been embarrassment nonetheless. What is the guarantee that a month or two down the line, once this BRICS summit is over, the dragon won't be breathing fire all over again?
Well, yes, I mean, Rahul, that remains a worry. And from what we are getting to hear from our sources in the Ministry of Defence is while the disengagement has started, this constant worry, not only at Doklam, but all along the line of actual control, vigilance and patrolling will be up, will be higher than what we have seen. Mind you, winters are coming. Nonetheless, as we had reported earlier, these will keep continuing. The Hawkeye along the border is going to continue till we are completely and totally sure that there are no movements in the other parts of the border. Mind you, while we were very, very strong out here, there are certain sections along the border where we aren't. And that is because of the terrain. And therefore, these things will continue. But what we are being told as of now, that it's a grid-by-grid withdrawal, that is, the troops withdraw simultaneously 100 meters each or 50 meters each, depending on what the local commanders decide, and slowly disengage. So, in a way, it's a big, big diplomatic victory for now, but what happens in the future, that we have to keep a very, very sharp vigil. Rahul.
So it's interesting, Gaurav, now, because the focus will be on what Xinhua, the Chinese state media, what Global Times, their tabloid say, because what's very clear, and we've already seen that from the Foreign Ministry, is that they will make it seem as if the Modi government blinked first. Although we were told about 10 days ago by highly placed officials in the Indian government that an engagement was being planned and the whole focus was on how this disengagement should be phrased. That's what the focus was on and has been for the last several days. This disengagement has been in the making for a very long while now.
this has been in the making, and sources did indicate that diplomatic engagement between the two countries on the phrasing of the disengagement would be extremely crucial, both for the two countries and also for the domestic constituencies, because again, there was some apprehension that the media would just go to town with it, and that is where India had told China that Indian media had been extremely restrained in its reporting of this situation, and this is being seen as a victory for diplomacy. You very rightly pointed out that China could have done this only because there's a BRICS summit. They didn't want the summit to collapse, and that is why this could be a tactical move. But that's what sources are saying. They will maintain a hawk-eye, and which is what Chief of the Army Staff General Bipin Rawat said. All along the 4,000-kilometer long line of actual control, there will be more such incidents, and that is where India needs to be vigilant and improve its security, Rahul.
News coming in, the Chinese Foreign Ministry has put out a statement. Well, they're clearly in no mood to let Modi government take away any of the credit. They're saying that India has withdrawn, that China and its army will continue to patrol in the Doklam Plateau. Joining us from there, a man on the ground in Beijing, Anant Krishnan. Anant, how is this disengagement being perceived in China? The foreign ministry seems to be wanting to claim victory.
That's right, Rahul. They are very clearly claiming it as a victory for China by saying that they are only confirming India's withdrawal, and they are also saying that they will continue to have a presence in Doklam. But at the same time, Rahul, I think we should take that with a pinch of salt, because it is highly unlikely that the Chinese are going to acknowledge their withdrawal from Doklam after 71 days of non-stop rhetoric. But I guess this is they framed it in a way that it could be seen as a compromise for both. They aren't claiming that they're still going to continue with the road building, and they've left some wiggle room that would allow both sides to interpret this as a victory for both Beijing and for New Delhi.
But is this short-lived, Anand? Because you've got a BRICS summit coming up at the start of next month. Xi Jinping clearly wanted Prime Minister Modi to be there. India not coming would have been a huge diplomatic embarrassment for China. Is this short-lived? Do you see this as being some kind of a workable solution?
Rahul, I think the sense is from most people that we speak to, and looking at what has happened, for example, in the South China Sea, that this could very much be short-lived. I think it was becoming increasingly clear as this dragged on for 70 days that there was a gap between this very heated rhetoric being Chinese media and concerns from the Chinese government that this BRICS summit was going to collapse, concerns from the Chinese government that they could be exposed before the party congress in November. And I think they realized that they were painting themselves into a corner, and the longer this went on, this was becoming more untenable even for the Chinese government to manage. So I think this was a realization that was dawning on them. But at the same time, of course, Rahul, as you said, we have to be vigilant, because the Scarborough Shoal standoff with the Philippines in the South China Sea, there was a temporary withdrawal by the Philippine side, but the Chinese came back very quickly, and today the Scarborough Shoal is under Chinese control. So I think that should be a wake-up call, as well as something that we all have to keep our eyes on.
Oh, absolutely. India simply cannot afford to let its guard down. There can be no two ways about it. We must also consider what a very senior army official told me over the last few days, which is that given the weather conditions now, it is impossible after August and early September for China to be able to maintain that long logistical supply line which would have been feeding its troops at the Doklam Plateau. So this is also tactical in some senses. I want to go across to our Foreign Affairs editor Geeta Mohan. A huge commendation for her for having broken this very substantial story, but now the spin from Beijing seems to be making it very clear that China doesn't think that they've backed down. They're instead making it seem as if India has walked away from Doklam.
Well, Rahul, this is playing to the domestic galleries. This is trying to ensure that Xi Jinping, as a leader, does not look weak in portraying or looking at the entire Doklam Standoff, Rahul. What we're looking at over here is the Chinese side trying to, and they had already set up a narrative that the Indian side have pushed out of Doklam or have left Doklam, but that was not the case. The Indian side and the Chinese side have been engaged, and yes, now they've come to an agreement that there is going to be a mutual and simultaneous disengagement at Doklam. But with the statements that we will hear from China, one shouldn't be surprised with it, given that China, one, does not want to look weak and had already been saying that the Indian side have withdrawn, which is not the case. But like Anand very rightly pointed out, Rahul, that Xi Jinping has a very important plenary in November.
Moment, Geeta, I need to fix that video line with you. We will come back to you in just a moment from now. The Chinese Foreign Ministry claiming it's India that's withdrawn. They don't make it seem as if there's been a simultaneous withdrawal, but on the ground, and we're being told this by very highly placed sources in the Indian government, what was agreed to was that there would be a near simultaneous disengagement, and that is exactly what has happened. And this also helps Anand Krishnan ensure that the BRICS summit does go ahead. The Prime Minister Modi will attend this BRICS summit. What's on the agenda? You'll be covering that for India today. What's likely to happen during this BRICS summit? Because there are likely to be bilaterals, and given the kind of personality Prime Minister Modi has, he's very likely to take this up front with the Chinese government. Anand Krishnan?
That's right, Rahul, if you can hear me.
Go on, go on.
This was the best outcome, as you rightly said. Prime Minister Modi is set to arrive here just on Sunday evening. So we're just talking about 6 days' time. And I think China certainly didn't want the BRICS summit to be overshadowed by the Doklam Standoff. And it was very clear that the media was going to be focusing on the border standoff. And this was something that deeply concerned people in Beijing. So I think from that point of view, it was very clear that this was the best possible outcome for all sides, even though it was just 5 or 6 days before the summit begins.
Chinese Daily has just put out a tweet. This is the China Daily. They put out a tweet claiming India, following its intrusion into China's Donglang area, removed all its personnel and facilities back to its side of the China-India border. So very clearly, that will be the projection we will see inside China, where they'll make it seem as if India backed off, whereas we know on good authority that's not quite what happened. What was agreed upon was that India will back off, and at this time the Chinese troops have backed off as well. Sudhir Ranjan Sen, how does the Ministry of Defence, which has been looking at this very, very carefully, intend to deal now with the posturing? Because it's not good posturing for the Modi government either for China to get away claiming victory. So we can't allow that to happen. And yet on the one side, from all the communication I'm getting from the Ministry of Defence, there is a high sense of relief that this tense and bitter standoff is finally over.
Well, yes, I mean, Rahul, what we can see in the next couple of days, if the rhetoric from the other side, goes beyond a point and it starts affecting the narrative within India, you can then expect to see some evidence being released from New Delhi to, buttress its claim that the withdrawal was simultaneous, and the fact that there was a diplomatic decision that both sides should disengage because of BRICS and because of several other things. That is one of the things that I perceive going forward in the next few days. What other things that we can expect is that the Ministry of Defence is not going to, we've done some movement of troops, we have mobilized a little bit. We are not going to call that off immediately. The Guard is going to be there, and the Guard is going to be there throughout the winter. Rahul.
Absolutely. India will stay on alert through the winter. I want to go across to Bharat Karnad. He's joining us on this broadcast. Foreign affairs expert, keeps a very close eye on China. A game of posturing now. India saying this is simultaneous withdrawal. The Chinese insisting that India went away first. Bharat.
Well, basically, I think the Chinese know that they've painted themselves into a corner, and that they have to have a face-saving way to say, well, we can't hack it. So this, the fact that they're trying to make rhetorical victory out of a stalemate, I think is their problem. But one thing, I think the Indian government should be mindful of is that rather than waiting for things to come out and so on, I think the MEA and the LOD should release whatever information they have now by way of the diplomatic solution Beijing and Delhi have arrived at, rather than leave it to them and then, you get into this entire cycle of he said this, we said that, and so on and so forth. To preempt and obviate that, I think we should release all the information that we have right away, and just to ensure that the Chinese don't even get the rhetorical edge, the sort of thing that the Global Times is going to tomorrow say that the Indians have, buckled down under pressure and so on and so forth. So
okay, I've got breaking news now. Xinhua, which is the Chinese official media, has put out a post just a short while before now saying that Beijing is confirming India's withdrawal from the face-off site at Doklam. That's coming from Xinhua, their main news agency controlled by the state. I want to go across now to General VP Malik, former Chief of the Indian Army Staff. He's joining us on this broadcast. General Malik, good afternoon, welcome. What do you make of this simultaneous withdrawal and China somehow making it seem to its domestic constituency that it is India that backed away first?
Look, we have to go by the statements that have been given both by the government of India and by the Chinese. But since we have been told that this is a mutual and a simultaneous withdrawal, I think the withdrawal monitoring can be done better from Indian side because we are holding the upper heights and this place is not very far from our locations. And so I suppose the monitoring part can be done. If they don't withdraw, I don't think our troops are going to withdraw from that location.
No, because now Beijing is making it seem as if India has gone away, and the foreign ministry also says, General Malik, that they will continue to patrol in Doklam.
Well, I must tell you that the patrolling in Doklam has been going on even earlier. And it is only the road construction which has been objected to by us strongly. And the other thing I must also bring in here that this is a dispute not between India and China alone. Bhutan has a major part to draw. After all, it is their territory that we are trying to, and we are trying to support and help them in this.
Okay, what should India's position be? You've travelled extensively through IMTRACT, you've travelled to these formations in and around Sikkim where the Indian Army is placed. At this time of the year, especially on the Chinese side in Doklam, now that we're at the end of August, it becomes increasingly inhospitable. What should India's position be? Does this in some senses, General Malik, remind you of Kargil? Because before the war, which you fought and led, India used to pull back from the high altitude reaches during the winter months, and then Pakistan betrayed us by climbing up mountains like Tiger Hill, Tololing, various places, Mashko, Batalik, Tras. Is that a fear we have now that if we were to back away, by the time it's time for next summer, Beijing would be occupying more places?
Look, firstly, I must tell you, as I said, this particular location is being overlooked by our side. We are in much close proximity than the Chinese are, and we can watch them go back. The other thing is that we have to remain alert on all along the border. There is no gainsaying on that. We have to remain alert, and there is no reason for us to sort of withdraw from all our monitoring position. As far as the rainfall is concerned, yes, I think the Chinese logistics would be more affected on account of the the monsoons than we will be affected. So I think we are in a better position here to monitor the withdrawal of the Chinese side so that we can also withdraw simultaneously, as it has been said. But as far as the other positions are concerned, I don't think there is any reason for us to become complacent in any manner.
Absolutely. No question of complacency. Thank you very much, General VP Malik, for joining us on this broadcast. I want to go across now to Sushant Sareen. He's joining us on this broadcast, leading strategic affairs expert. Mr. Sareen, welcome. What do you make of India insisting that there's been a simultaneous and mutual withdrawal, whereas China is making it seem to its domestic constituency that India walked away first?
Look, clearly India is not walking away. If India had to walk away, we would have walked away when the rhetoric was sky high. I think what has happened is that back channels and diplomacy has worked. And both sides have decided that, getting into a standoff, which could lead to some kind of an accident, as you go along, was hardly the way to handle this matter. And better sense has prevailed, and both sides have decided to pull back. Now, of course, it's entirely understandable that China, which is prancing about, as a global superpower and what have you, would want some kind of a face saver to show to its own people. So if they are saying that we'll continue to patrol, well, they were patrolling even in the past, as were the Bhutanese, and it's not as though the Indians have said, okay, fine, we are going to withdraw all the way, out of Sikkim, or we are not going to stop. We are going to stop manning our posts. In any case, what is our withdrawal? Our withdrawal is 150 or 200 meters. And if the Chinese were to, renege on this deal and start the road construction, which was the problem to start with, then the standoff will once again come into play. So I think this is a diplomatic solution. It's a sensible solution. Better sense has prevailed on both sides. But does this mean the end of our problems with China? Certainly not. I think this could be the start of many of these problems likely to come with China.
Interesting, because we've seen now China open up new fronts, especially in Ladakh along the Pangong Lake, which is where they have greater mobilization, they have greater deployment superiority, and therefore, is that something India should watch out for, the possibility of China opening new fronts in the days to come?
Not just watch out for, I think we need to beef up our presence in many of these areas. I think we've been notoriously lax. Rahul, you guys have been, taking out stories, talking about, the road construction projects which have been on the anvil, building railroads so that we have a better infrastructure to provision troops and to, tie in some of these frontier areas. And we know what has been the achievement on many of those projects. So I think it is about time that we become extremely serious about how we are going to manage our borders, especially with, a power like China breathing down our necks. Also, in terms of our defense preparedness, defense modernization, we've been very lax over the last couple of, a couple of decades, I would say. So I think it is important that we get serious about national security. We devote the kind of resources that are required. We make the kind of preparations that are required so that, even a country like China...
Defense budget is only 1.3% of its total budget, whereas in China they spend more than 3% of the total budget on defense. So this really is a wake-up call also for the Indian government to expedite a lot of weapon purchases which had been stalling for decades now. We're slipping into a quick break. Remember, we are tracking two big stories this afternoon. Dera Sacha Sauda chief Ram Rahim will be sentenced in a short while from now. 10 years could be the minimum that he is looking at. It could go up to 15. We will bring you all the latest from Sirsa, from Rohtak, from Panchkula. When we come back, we're also continuing to track all the unfolding reactions on this big simultaneous withdrawal at Doklam. Our coverage continues on the other side of a very quick break. Stay with us.